No, it's definitely not.
Well, my name is Charlie Fink. I am a columnist for Forbes. You can follow me at Charlie Fink, where I shamelessly pimp all of my writing. I cover augmented and virtual reality and new media. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the expanding AR universe and all the great products that are about to hit the market, as well as the fun that's been added to the Apple Store and apps because of iOS 11, which supports augmented reality. So I put together a little clip at 60 seconds long, just examples of mobile AR. So I'm going to introduce the panel. I'm running it again. I'm going to introduce the panel, starting with my friend Mike Levine, who is the founder and CEO of Happy Giant, which is a game developer, and he is the creator of HoloGrid Monster Battle AR. Mike, thanks for making the journey here and for joining the panel.
Thank you for having me. So we, about 3 years ago, we started to focus solely or almost exclusively on AR. We kind of looked around at what we felt was coming next, and we're really excited about the potential of AR. I was lucky enough to have some friends at Magic Leap, so I got to go down there early, and that sort of helped me understand where this is potentially going. And so that kind of culminated with, we made this game with Phil Tippett, who is a legendary Visual Effects Academy Award winner, worked on many films, most notably Star Wars and the iconic holochess scene. So we kind of did a game inspired by that, using his original monsters, and of course, that was a 9-second scene, so we had to completely invent the gameplay for it. We did it as a Kickstarter initially. We've now taken it to, I believe, 9 platforms, the latest being ARKit, and it's really been a journey for us sort of along the way. It was the cliche of jumping out of the plane without the parachute. We believed the future of AR was coming, we just didn't know what form it was going to take, and a few months ago ARKit was announced, and since then we've been really focused on that, and our title has been featured by Apple for the last couple weeks and doing really well.
All right, here's a look at HoloGrid Monster Battle AR.
And one thing we discovered with ARKit is you can still play it on a tabletop like holochess, but if you want to play it gigantically on your driveway, like Harry Potter chess, you can do that as well, which I find a very cool, unique game experience, to actually be walking on a game board while you're playing it.
Next up, I'd like to introduce Ben Taft. He's the CEO of Mira, which is a brand new startup that has a very special product that's coming to market this Christmas, and I'll let him explain what that is. It's a sold-out product, by the way, so sorry about that. But please go ahead. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks so much, Charlie.
At Mira, we're building the first consumer-facing, yet accessible augmented reality platform that we're really designing to be social first. And my co-founders and I actually met in the inaugural class of Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine's program at USC. Back about 2 years ago, my two co-founders were actually building some of the first experiences for Sony's PlayStation VR. And at the same time, I was working at a company called Daiquiri, selling a $15,000 AR smart helmet to enterprise use cases. And as best friends and classmates, we put our heads together and said, how can we start building amazing, immersive AR content for the consumer? The only way to do it was to invest a couple $1,000s in a Microsoft HoloLens dev kit or any other enterprise-facing kit. And we almost pulled together the money to do it, but said, you know what, let's just build our own. And at first, we created a laundry list of smartphone components, and we would go on Alibaba and scour those pages for Android spec phones. We'd rip them apart and hack them together and have these makeshift smart glasses, but then said, if we're just building this out of smartphone components, why can't we just design a solution around the smartphone? It's exactly how VR is getting adopted. More people are buying the $99 accessory for the smartphone rather than the multi-$1,000 tethered setup in the home. So with that, our first prototype was a 3D print, and we didn't have the $10,000 for custom optics. So we did all the geometric calculations necessary, and we scoured the internet for clear plastic that matched that same radius of curvature, and we stumbled upon these plastic fish bowls from Amazon. And we would literally cut these square lenses out of plastic fish bowls and hot glue them onto these 3D prints and jam our smartphone into the system. And lo and behold, we actually had a working AR headset. And we knew we were onto something. And then back in March, we actually closed a seed round that was led by Sequoia with investments from Mark Benioff, Will.i.am, Jimmy Iovine, and a few others, an additional $1 million. A few months later, led by Founders Fund and Greylock. So with that money, we've been able to take that 3D printed plastic fishbowl prototype and turn it into a real product with a production line. And we just sold out of our first batch of developer kits that we began to ship about 2 weeks ago.
All right, let's take a look. All right. The next panelist is Mike Goslin. He's Vice President of Advanced Development at Disney. Disney is introducing a new AR headset based on its intellectual property, Star Wars. As you saw from my compilation, Star Wars seems to be everywhere. But it belongs to Disney, and they're going to do something fantastic with it and AR.
So my name is Mike Goslin. My job at Disney is to invent new businesses for the company and also commercialize them. So it's a really sort of like a startup kind of mentality, get things out there really quickly in new areas that could turn into big businesses for the company. We love augmented reality, but we're an experience-first company, as you probably know. So the way we approached this was, what is the experience that we could deliver on AR? And we thought the best thing we could do is lightsabers, because it's hard to do them right. You know, you have plastic ones that don't quite look right, they don't feel right, and you can't sort of enter that world. And so we thought AR was a good way to do that. So we really focused on the experience part of it and designed what's essentially some hardware and a system of hardware and software to support that experience. And then if it works, and we think it is working, we can take it further, because the other thing we really focus on is things that can scale. So we're building this for a mass audience. We want everybody to be able to understand it and also be able to play and be able to afford it. And so we think we've kind of hit it all with this product. We partnered with Lenovo to bring it out. It's coming out this holiday. So it's on pre-order currently and will be on shelf in November. So here's a quick video of our product.
Our fourth panelist is Debbie Ruth. She's the Senior Vice President of Global Media and Entertainment for Magid Research. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you, Charlie.
Go ahead.
So at Magid, we do consumer research. I work in the global media and entertainment space, and we look at everything from big trends to small, custom, private research. A lot of it around consumer experience, and all of it is really human-centric. And so we, in the VR and AR world, heard a lot of our clients talking about it, dabbling in the space, and we really wanted to ground everybody in some reality. That was brought up on the last panel. It's like, well, what does a consumer really think? And so we started a 3-year initiative looking at VR and AR, and we're now at the beginning of our 2nd year, tracking consumer awareness first, interest, purchase behavior, and then also people who are interested in it, how once they've purchased, in this case VR, how they use it over time and how that changes. So we're doing an 8-month study on that. So all of it is quite interesting. And the tracking study that's part of this, we do every 6 months. And at first it looks like not much is changing. But the next tracker is going to be in November. And what we found in April is that AR, and that's the topic of this panel, is people just don't recognize the term. They know the IP, they know some of the apps, they've actually used it. Even beyond Pokemon Go, there's some. But that word augmented reality or AR has not resonated yet. Now it'll be fascinating to see how that changes since the announcements with ARKit and what iPhone has done and what's coming out with Google. But for now, AR is kind of like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Augmented reality is the World Wide Web. When was the last time you used that phrase? So I think in a couple of years, it's just going to be part of what we do. I don't think people will rush out and label it. That's, I've had several people say, I'm not doing augmented anything because it's just a big word that doesn't have any meaning in that context. But, I had a great first question for you, but you got me going with your studies. What can you share with us about consumer trends in this category? Is it all just App Store stuff, or is there something else we should be thinking about?
Right now, people recognize apps. So that's really what AR is in their world. And when I talk about awareness, we have about, I would say, 30% of the population feels like they've heard about it. They don't necessarily know exactly what it is. And then another 20% are like, I think I kind of know what you're talking about. So less than 50%, and that's compared to about 70% for VR. So there's a level of awareness. When you talk about specific apps, like Pokemon Go, which technically, isn't, but it's something that they're aware of. So I do think it's going to be driven by that. When we talk about headsets, there's no awareness.
Yeah.
Some people know about HoloLens, that's about it.
Well, good. That's a good segue into my actual first question, which is Christmas is coming. And everybody's going to get some goodies under their tree. Maybe you'll get a Star Wars headset with a lightsaber as $200. And then Mira Prism, including the controller, $100. So these are very, very accessible items that they're going to be at, I guess, Best Buy and Walmart and just basically everywhere. So it'll be hard to avoid buying one, I think, for anybody who has the slightest interest in tech and or Star Wars, which I guess that's the same group. Anyway, so other than Mira and Star Wars AR, what can we expect from Google and Microsoft and Apple this coming Christmas? Are they going to get into the game?
Well, I was referring to what Debbie said also, is I think the burden is mainly on those big companies to spread consumer awareness. And, since I like beating up on big companies, I think Apple really dropped the ball.
Big
like
time.
at the WWDC, they got developers like us insanely excited about it. The developer community, it's just off the charts with all the stuff you saw Charlie showing. But then when it came to the keynote, which is much more widely watched by a consumer mass audience, the AR community felt they dropped the ball. They
downplayed it because they knew it was going to be kind of disappointing.
I'm not sure that's the reason. I think there was a lack of content for them to show.
But why didn't Apple then take one of their flagship products like Apple Maps and add AR to it as a demonstration of the potential?
That's a damn good question.
Right? Wouldn't you do that if you were a platform owner?
I would.
Right? Disney is creating a platform. They might have other developers developing content for that platform, but to introduce it, they've developed content themselves that's going to be great content. So they know they've got that covered. So it's just surprising to me that Apple wouldn't do something so obvious. And it may be they didn't do it because the underlying technology is just not that powerful. Most people are not using iPhone 8s and above. As a result, running AR apps stresses out your iPhone, it drains your battery, it heats up your phone, and when your phone heats up like that, other bad things happen. So I toasted my iPhone 6 testing ARKit, and that actually turned out to be a good thing. It was old and I got a new phone, which is awesome, but AR killed it. So that is a problem when you introduce something that kills people's phones. So I think that AR, some of the upset among developers is well-founded. I think it's one of those things in retrospect we all should have seen. Apple was kind of dropping clues and hedging, but I don't think anything really prepared everybody, specifically developers like Mike, who did essentially a 12-week crash course to have an app ready for the release of iOS 11, and then it's an environment which isn't much better than the regular App Store, and the apps themselves are challenging and buggy. Apple doesn't have enough support for all the developers, and I mean, it wasn't a great experience, I think, for either Apple consumers or Apple developers. I think it probably was okay for Apple itself. They certainly have been dominating the conversation in AR. So,
Before we move on to that, though, I wanted to say
Please,
something
yeah.
about Christmas. So I think it's important not to set up AR the way VR was set up. In a short term, did we sell headsets? Oh, we didn't, everything must be bad. I mean, I think right now, both VR and AR really need persistence and patience, and it needs to go through these iterations to be able to mature and develop. And so I think calling something dead or alive or this year's thing is really premature on both fronts. So I just caution about that.
no, I think that's a great point. And certainly, especially as a follow-up to what I had to say. So let's talk about AR for a second. I guess everybody here knows that what AR means and what ARKit and ARCore and the new innovations in handheld computing mean is that the camera can now be used as the interface. That's what you saw in the videos, was people looking through their cell phone, either using a headset or looking directly at the screen, and the camera was taking the real world and digitizing it and combining it with data and images and entertainment. So how do we think this is going to change things long term, Mike Goslin?
Well, so we actually don't use the camera. We have an optical augmented reality system. So you noticed in the video there's a slip-in phone, but the phone slips in like this.
Oh.
So you're actually looking out through...
It's not bouncing light down and then onto the...
It is bouncing the light down and around. We found this is better for optical comfort, and it gives us some advantages. You don't have camera lag, so you can move around more freely. It's just more comfortable to wear. It's more comfortable on your eyes, and you can focus at a greater depth. If you do one of these kind of things where you're looking through the camera, there's not much room between your eyes and the optics, so it's just less comfortable optically. The downside of that is you now need a very bright image because you're sort of fighting with the real world, and so we have a number of patents around how to maintain brightness in these kinds of situations. And so, but I think the camera thing is really interesting because that's the only way to really do really hard occlusion. And so there's some advantages to each approach. And I think as cameras get better, there are going to be lots of ways to do this. So you'll see kind of a mix. Some people are going to do the optical see-through and some people are going to do camera-based. But cameras, in my opinion, before they can be mass market, cameras have to get faster, less lag on the camera, and much higher resolution.
Mike Levine, you want to take this on? The question we're talking about is the camera, and what does that change, using the camera?
Well,
I mean,
think
certainly this as a form factor
Yeah.
can't be good for very long.
I mean, to the point you made to me earlier, it's talking about the current form factor with ARKit, so people have to hold up their phones, and like you said, you kind of, if you're playing for a long enough time, your arms start to get tired. You're holding this thing up, and I sort of give it the hurdle we have to pass, like with AR, is like, I look at my sons playing their mobile games, laying down on the couch like this, and you just can't play an AR game like that currently. You have to be a little bit more invested. So like with HoloGrid, when we first came out with it way back, the card-based version, the play pattern was like more based on Hearthstone, so the matches were like 10 plus minutes. So with ARKit, we knew we had to get that way down, and so we sped up the game, we did all these things, so now the matches, you can play them in like 2 to 3 minutes, because we just knew people, short little bite-sized contents we feel for
Yeah, that's smart.
ARKit is the key.
Mike, how long do the experiences last when you're using your apps?
Oh, so we originally thought it was going to have to be really short because we weren't sure, what we were going to have in terms of weight and comfort. So we designed, initially a lot of the content was designed for, 5-10 minutes. But as we started getting further into it, we started to realize it was fine. You can wear it for much longer. So we have experiences that you can play for, half hour or longer. I still think kind of the best way to play is sort of to mix it up, to sort of, wear it for a while and then go do something else. But it's pretty comfortable to wear. We were surprised. I think if you get into something that's, hours and hours of play, just wearing anything on your head for that long is probably asking a bit much.
So Ben Taft, follow-up question. You guys are a new headset maker, and you've had to develop your own apps to demonstrate the power and potential of your system. How many apps did you guys develop?
We've got about a half dozen in the pipeline right now.
And how has the response from the developer community been, and what do you expect to be adding?
So developers got their headsets about last week, about 2 weeks ago, and we have a lot of them in a Slack channel, in a discourse forum, and we're doing a lot of community building and listening very closely to how the developers are responding. We built the first set of apps both as a way to let people try the headset, but really as a way to be able to build our own SDK and let other developers build for the headset. And the response has been overwhelming, and we just got our first third-party app built, and it's a fascinating demo where you look at a textbook and you look at a specific diagram of a skull, and that skull comes out of the page, and it breaks apart, and then with the remote, you can interact with it and learn more about it. And that's an experience that studio is going to be pitching to McGraw-Hill, which is the largest textbook manufacturer in the world. So the response has been, only in just 1 week, has been overwhelming, and we cannot wait to see what developers continue to build with such an accessible tool.
So I guess developers are in a dilemma, Mike Levine, because you don't know if you're getting in on the ground floor or whether it's too early.
One thing I'm always talking about, and we're trying to remain cognizant of, and to Debbie's point, is like where we are now, ARKit, and even these types of headsets, this is just another step in the AR journey. It's going to improve. It's going to get better. We're going to have better cameras. We're going to have better sensors. So we try to think about that even as when we're developing apps for ARKit. We want to make sure that they're going to be able to work on platforms that are coming right here and now and in the future. And we put a lot of work in the beginning to developing a flexible platform. As I said, we brought it to 9 different platforms already. So we kind of have a procedure now, depending on the tech, to get it to different types of hardware. But to your point, we have to be careful and sort of pick and choose who we think, where we want to be and what the winners are going to be.
Debbie, let's talk for a second about the challenges of consumer adoption of new technology. What does it look like for these new devices? This is, I guess, a first adopter market? Except for Star Wars, which is like not a first, there's so many people waiting for Star Wars anything that I think that's a got a good chance of being pretty popular.
Yeah, I think that would be more perceived as more IP driven as
Yeah.
opposed to somebody who's technology driven.
Yeah.
I think what we learned from VR, I think, can be applied to AR with relation to it being iPhone or phone based, and that's that one of the unexpected things, yet logical when you think about it, is that people who used VR with their smartphone felt out of touch because they couldn't actually use it, or if they didn't have the settings correct, then things would be interrupted because they'd get a text message. But the fact that they were disconnected from checking this every 10 seconds or whatever it is now was really problematic for people. So if your phone is engaged doing something else for you, there's an anxiety that starts building in people, and so that's really going to be an interesting thing if we keep relying on the smartphone to be the driver of AR.
Well, of course, though, if you take it way down the road, though, that's why Tim Cook says this could replace the iPhone. That's what Magic Leap thinks. So
Exactly.
eventually, you're going to be playing Holo Chess and get a notification, hey, you got an email, and you won't have to take your
Right,
phone
just to
out.
jump in and,
Exactly.
clarify a little bit, it is generally thought of, perhaps in a wishful thinking, science fiction-y kind of way, that AR will lead to the elimination of the screen and the domination of us by the screen. So for example, the Ousterhout group has actually a commercial product called the R8. It's $1,000. It's being sold by Meigu in China. I know there are other people in the States who have them, but it's a little bit like an early Tesla.
ODG?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
And
have one.
You have one?
Yeah.
He knows everybody. So, but inside the glasses, well, first of all, it'll import your desktop, which you can interact with. And the other thing it does is it's very good for video. And I guess people who use it, it's like sitting 5 feet away from a 90-inch screen. So it's really, really good for consuming content, and 20th Century Fox invested in them for that reason. So, Ben, here's a question, it's not exactly about Mira, but what do you think AR is going to do for existing apps like Snapchat and Facebook and Amazon and eBay? I mean, you know, we're all focused on Google, but there's a whole ecosystem of apps that have hundreds of millions of users. So what are they going to do? You know, they kind of have not yet played their hand. What do you expect?
I think the most interesting part of your question is that it's the first time that we've actually mentioned Snapchat. And Snapchat is actually the most widely adopted AR platform in the world. There's actually 134 million users who use it every day, and all the users of it are using AR. They're using face filters, they're using world lenses, they're using, you may have seen the Jeff Koons statue in the park. Everyone on that platform is using AR, and they don't even know that they're using AR. And when we're talking about how we can educate the consumer, you know, what is this AR thing? And, you know, Apple and Google are releasing things called AR Kit, AR Core, advertising things as AR. It's going to be a challenge to break through that barrier in the consumer's mind versus taking approaches like Snapchat or even Disney and introducing an experience that doesn't have to be called AR. It's just something that they like to use and they're familiar with. And in terms of other platforms catching up, right now, there's a lot of content, 2D content, right, which is what you're describing with ODG. A really great use case is just watching a 90-inch screen in your room. You know, when the TV first came out, the first shows were just people broadcasting into a microphone as though it were a radio show. And the first radio shows were just people reading newspapers as though it was a newspaper show, right? And we're going to have that same exact trend in 3D content. At first, it's going to be bringing in all this 2D content because it's familiar and people can understand the value of it. But the biggest challenge for these platforms is going to be how to actually start creating content in 3D from the ground up.
You know, it's interesting just to follow on with that. You know, we talk about AR Kit and AR Core and Google Tango because we're nerds, but these are not words that consumers should ever hear. AR Kit is a software development kit for software developers. It is not something that should be marketed to consumers. Most of them don't know what a software development kit is, and nor should they. I don't know, you know, how most businesses work, nor should I. So, that's one of those like under the hood things, and I think people who are around the industry can get a little confused by what ARKit is, just the software development kit for Apple iOS 11 mobile, and ARCore is its counterpart for Google. There are subtle differences that matter to developers.
And we have mixed reality thanks to Microsoft to confuse things more.
Right, but the issue with the Microsoft platform is there aren't that many units out there, right?
No, but they're still pushing the term, which only confuses
Oh, we're going to get
things
into the term.
more.
Well, Microsoft has stolen that term from an academic study
Okay.
in 1992, so don't get me started on Microsoft mixed reality. It has created, and there was another definition of mixed reality, by the way, a year ago that has kind of gotten pushed out thanks to our friends at Microsoft. And here's the crazy thing about their adoption of the word mixed reality. They don't really do mixed reality. I mean, it's sort of the HoloLens does, but everything they're doing this Christmas, which is about head-mounted displays working with Intel computers, is about fully occluded virtual reality. Where they're competing with the
Yes.
Oculus Rift
Yes.
and the HTC Vive. So there are a lot of crazy things going on around language, and I think that is a symptom of how early this is. We can't even agree. Experts can't agree on what to call things. And of course, everybody is jockeying around trying to own the language so that they can be Xerox. So that everybody walks into a store and says, I want a Xerox. Even though it's referring to a generic thing, that is their brand. So you build a brand quickly that way, if you can control the language. But it's not super relevant to this, but I think it's up to writers and analysts and other people to identify what the language is. It is not up to companies because they're not going to act in the interests of consumers and people who talk about this stuff all day. They're going to act in the interest of their own company. So, Mike Goslin, how do you think entertainment and storytelling are going to be different in AR? Can we talk about that? Let's talk about the potential and what possibilities does it open up?
Sure. So kind of touching on the point you just made about, I don't know, AR, mixed reality, all that stuff. Our kind of opinion is that a person doesn't know why they need an augmented reality headset, and they don't know why they need a VR headset for that matter. They don't know why they need a headset at all, but they know they want a lightsaber. They know they want to go to these places to experience these things. And so that's kind of the approach that we're taking. And so it is kind of, you can call it storytelling. I kind of focus on the experience part of it. What AR allows you to do, though, is also bring in your social environment. So going back to the social point, one of the great things about AR is I'm playing this thing. I can see Darth Vader there in my room, but I can also see my friend. And we can be doing something together. And I can also be streaming that to my feed. And
so somebody else could see what you're seeing?
Yeah.
That's epic because people like to watch other people play games.
Being social is a big part of, I think what's missing in AR and to some extent still in VR is just content, really good content and lots of it. And that's going to take a while. And so if we can bring other people into the experience, that's going to really help accelerate that. And it also takes advantage of the medium. I mean, I can be more active because I can see things. I'm not going to crash into the wall because I can see it, the room I'm in. So I'm not stuck in one place. I can move around. I can be active. I can see my friends. I can interact with them. And so I think that's the real power. So the types of stories that we're trying to tell are ones about, hey, I'm battling these guys. Come join me. Let's do it together. And maybe we'll, show off.
Can two people
moves.
play together?
Not at launch, but that's one of the things we're really excited about. It's coming soon.
That's something that Mira can do. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it's going to be the biggest differentiator of AR, especially as compared to VR, is the fact that it's social, and you can be in your room and you can see your friends. So one of the first things we wanted to make sure was available in our SDK is just allowing two people to connect their headset experiences and see the same exact virtual object in the physical world as though it were real. And that extends headset to headset. You can have multiple headset users. You can connect headset to phone. So if you don't have a headset, you can take out your phone and participate that way, and phone to phone as well. And I think if more people can kind of work on that sort of collaborative aspect and making sure that you can join anyone's AR experience locally, remotely, seamlessly, whether you have a headset, phone, whatever your lens is, as long as we're connecting all those experiences, that's what's really going to allow AR to differentiate itself and become a very compelling experience and take off.
Mike Goslin, have you guys thought about working with third-party developers, or are you going to be focused on keeping the Star Wars headset?
So yes, we've definitely thought about it. We think, as much as we're focusing on, hey, this is about, learning how to be a Jedi and having a lightsaber, we do think that this is something that can be expanded, and we certainly aren't going to create all the content in this space. In my opinion, all boats rise. So we are actively thinking about it and talking to people about it, and so we think the future is lots of content, lots of really cool content. Some of it is our IP, and some of it may be.
But
other stuff.
all available on your platform,
Yeah.
just as it would be on other platforms.
Yeah,
So.
and I think
Do you guys have an SDK, software development kit, that you share with developers?
we do, but it's not a public-facing one yet.
Oh, okay, well, we know a little now. I don't want to drop this topic completely without bringing you into it, Mike Levine, since you are the guy on this panel who actually codes things and makes things and designs games. So, we're really talking about, when we talk about entertainment and storytelling and augmented and virtual reality, we're talking about a merger of storytelling and games.
Yep. Well, let me do something kind of stupid that I like to do. How many people in here have even tried an ARKit app? Okay. How many people have ever tried AR through some type of headset? Wow, almost as many, if not more. So, in my opinion, and that's why, again, we're always trying to think of the long game, and that's why we're so interested in working with these platforms, that when you go, the ARKit, I think, is cool, and I think there has a lot of potential there, and obviously you have a massive installed base, which makes it very interesting. But when you go to a headset, there is no question that you raise the immersion level, by a factor of whatever. It's a different type of experience when you're not forced to be holding this thing and looking through this small window. Your world has changed, and with things like the controllers and peripherals, which we kind of predicted, and we have a lot of experience because we've worked with the toy industry a lot on those types of things, that the connection of those two things, of the peripherals and the headsets, I think has incredible potential, and I don't know if I answered your question, but
No, that was
okay.
exactly right. But let's just drill down on that a little bit more, because the Apple software development kit and the capabilities of augmented reality on the iPhone are limited, right? There's a lot that's not included in there. So can we talk about what's missing? Because I think this is really important to
Well-
the apps you imagine. There may not be infrastructure there to support them.
Yeah, I'm sure anyone here can answer this, but ARKit, just to be clear, it only recognizes a plane, a flat surface. It has no knowledge of the room, of objects in the room. It can't persistently store the data of that flat surface, not that you could do much with it even if you did. There's no concept of storing persistence to a cloud. These are the things that are coming, that we're looking forward to, because to your point, it is very limited right now, and we're trying to design games, though. It's limited, but it's also still a quantum leap in what we had before it.
Yeah. So, Debbie, next 12 to 24 months, who's making money with AR?
Apple App Store, I think. That's my answer.
Ben Taft? Ben, what do you think?
It's a tough question. I think it's so early that there's a lot of different ways to approach the industry and monetizing. I think in general it's a little bit too early to monetize in a significant way, in a meaningful way. In the next 12 to 24 months, it's really going to be focused on adoption, and it's going to be more of long-term investment, which is the reason we went for venture capital. Because it's going to take a while for people to get educated about what AR is and really understand its value, and it's going to be a while before there are a lot of other killer use cases like Star Wars out there. There's definitely some room, on the hardware side and on the content side, the content distribution side, but overall, it's not going to be, I don't think, extremely profitable or meaningful in the next 1 to 2 years.
Enterprise, it will be.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
People focused on enterprise will.
Definitely. I want to just second that. Just from my experience working at DAQRI, and we mentioned ODG a couple times, there's some very amazing use cases that if you guys haven't seen, you should check them out. What's going on in
I just
enterprise.
did a story on VR and medicine And of course, hospitals are used to paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for little pieces of equipment, so the cost of VR is not that meaningful to them. They have, surgeons use something called a sawbones to practice, and it actually is like a plastic bone that's been molded and acts like a bone when you drill into it and stuff. This is an example of VR creating a simulation that has no marginal cost, which makes it very profitable to have if you are a surgical hospital. So there are the enterprise guys can pay.
To make the point, though, for Niantic, if they were here, I think they would say people are already making money on AR.
Niantic created Pokemon Go.
And rumored to be working on other things that could potentially be as big. And that's why we honestly think, and it's one of the things I'm doing when I'm out here, is that brands are very important to AR. To introduce, you're talking about new technology, new play patterns, new way of playing. The least you can do is give them a brand that they love, because they don't know what it is. Like he said, you don't know why you need this, but you want a lightsaber. You want to play Pokemon. You want to play Harry Potter, etc., Walking Dead. So I think initially, even though typically in new technology, that's when the original stuff comes out first, I think with this, and you're seeing it with VR to a certain extent, brands are critical.
And it's a perfect marketing mechanism, too. I mean, it's an on-ramp to a lot of fantastic marketing opportunities.
Yeah, and obviously we think there's a business there, but you have to have the right IP and you have to have the right price point, and it has to be a really simple story that consumers can understand. And so that's what we're doing, and we're very bullish on it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Disney owns a lot of great IP. So is that something that may ultimately be something that you guys start to exploit in using this platform?
Yeah, of course. What we really do is we create IP that people want to get into deeper. And so this is just one of many ways we do wish fulfillment for fans of our different content. And it's a really good way to make it, very
I'm ready for the Pirates experience. Just to think a little bit about how smartphones have changed the world, if we could all just reflect for a minute on 2005, when we used phones to make phone calls, and we carried an iPod and a camera and lots of gadgets with us. I can walk around without my backpack most of the time because it just is an all-in-one device that fits in my pocket, and it's really changed the world in a very, very serious way, good and bad. Do we think that head-mounted augmented reality has that kind of potential?
I think we're at the suitcase phone stage, not even the 2000s. I mean, things are big and bulky, and they are definitely going to become contact lenses or something embedded, even probably not in a shorter time span than we went from suitcase phones to this.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that walking around like this on a small screen is not the best way to do anything. And so, once you get it out there and it's your whole field of view, it's much better for anything. But we're very entertainment focused. In particular, entertainment, having your hands free is really critical. And so, I have no question that the solution is going to be wearable, and it just has to get more and more comfortable. People don't like wearing big things on their heads. Generally, and they want to look cool, and so they have to get better looking. I think more energy has to be put into that part of it if you really want to go mass market.
Go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say that AR, it's going to be crucial that there's an HMD or a contact lens or just a way for a camera to be seeing what you're seeing at all times and processing that information, because our technology is going to achieve such a high level of automation through autonomous vehicles, smart homes. There's going to be this entire sort of ring of this industrial IoT, this kind of second wave of IoT. And there's going to be no way for a human to interact with that technology because our brain can't keep up with the speed in which the computing and the processing of all that information can happen at. So the only way that we're going to be able to interact in that matrix of technology is if we have a camera on us that can see what we're seeing and process the information and communicate with that technology exponentially faster than we can. So it's inevitable that AR has to take off for humans to just be able to keep up with the technology that we're developing right now.
Okay, you just scared the crap out of me.
Okay, Elon Musk is working on that, the brain interface.
Exactly.
Like, for real.
Like that.
So the consensus is that AR headsets are inevitable once the technology gets there, and they are stylish enough, which I super agree with, right? Snapchat specs are really cool looking, and they work. Their biggest problem, of course, is people didn't want to do what they did, because taking 10-second video with your glasses does not take something that you're already doing and make it better.
See, the problem is really George Lucas, because he set up the public to think that AR could be made without glasses, and that's not really going to happen in our lifetime, or at least mine, I don't think. And,
Right.
and I do think
So we're not going to see holograms floating in space anytime soon?
when you wear a headset, you will, but without
Right,
that.
a hologram needs a projection surface.
Yeah,
if
unless
you're not wearing
Disney's working
glasses.
on something I don't know about. But yeah, I mean, other than, camera-based projection and those types of ways to do those tricks that, Disney World, et cetera, has been doing for years, it's just not going to happen.
So I thought that it was interesting that Ben brought up this notion of human augmentation, and if you're down with the concept that we need glasses to augment ourselves so that we can keep up with the changing world, well then, it naturally goes to implants, and, we've seen, different science fiction-y schemes where you have a watch that projects onto your arm, so your arm becomes the projection surface, so you just hold it up like this. So there's a lot of that kind of wearable, integrating it with our beings, because humans have always sought to augment themselves in some way. We're reaching the last quarter of our panel. Does anybody have any questions? Whoa. Yes, you, sir.
I'm very interested in asking what your contemplation is about audio. Audio is a tremendous force. It's an equal partner in VR in terms of immersive audio, in terms of storytelling, which I'm deeply involved in. But it seems to me that we're looking at Max Sennett movies here. And no one is talking about audio, about immersive audio, head tracking, and how audio is a very, very important part of storytelling. And it seems to be missing in most of the lectures that I've approached this morning. No one talks about the audio. They assume that it's just going to be there. What is it, and how do you plan to use head tracking and using audio for storytelling?
Well, that's sort of an ongoing joke in game development anyways, that the audio people are always complaining that they're the afterthought. But no, to your point, I mean, like the devices that can support it, for example, if anyone's used a HoloLens, the audio in that I think is amazing and is critical to that experience, because you can fully, and we did it in HoloGrid, where you can fully have 3D sounds, you can hear the meteor storm coming from behind you, shooting at the opponents, and just in an AR experience when you're in a room, like VR, to hear something from behind you as a trigger to get you to look behind you, I'm on the same page with you. Completely agree.
Yeah, I agree too. We spend a lot of time on audio. Audio is at least half of the experience from our perspective, and so we support spatialized audio, because you know where people are looking. You can take advantage of that, so beyond stereo even.
Yes.
My name is Donald Diane, and I'm interested in the medical having all this electricity coming from computer generation, where there's radiation from the computer that has been known to cause cancer. Has that been researched? And as you talk about from Disney, Star Wars making a Jedi now being in the acting business, now I'm trying to figure out, this is new now, how are you going to monetize the actors in that, because that's old content, and I think they've already been paid. So this is new streams for everybody, glasses with on projectors.
All right, that was about 4 questions, but does anybody want to take one of them? I mean, the role of traditional Hollywood storytelling in this new medium, I would say, is as yet unknown. To use actors, you need to use something called volumetric capture, which is extremely difficult and extremely data intensive and very difficult to manage once you do create it. And it has to be married with a process called photogrammetry. So you create the room with photogrammetry, you capture the actors with volumetric capture, and then you insert them into the 3D space that you've created. So it is it's a lot easier to make animated VR than it is to make live VR. And then what's the storytelling going to be like? No one knows. Everybody talks about escape rooms and Sleep No More, but we really don't know because no one has done it. It's really, really hard. And I'm sure people will. Volumetric capture is going to be very, very important, particularly to live sports, I think. So it's going to get figured out. Intel and others are working on it. And then there may be some clues as to what are the roles of performers and other artists going to be.
I'm talking about specifically the Jedi one because, you know, if I don't know if any of the people like Princess Leia or any figures are in there, but I'm saying they're in the one that's getting ready to come out. And since this is new revenue that you talk about, have you created anything where, you know, I know she's going to go to the estate of, you know, the characters that
There were no live actors in the development of this product. So I think in the future, when that's possible, you know, we'll have to explore how do actors participate. But it's similar to the games business. I mean, if you use someone's likeness or their voice, then they're part of it, and otherwise, it's just a computer simulation.
Yeah, let's go to the next question. Did you have a question, sir?
Yeah, actually, I had a question for Ruth. You mentioned about consumer recognition of AR right now, and kind of it's either below the line or non-existent. Where would you say we are with VR in comparison from a consumer perspective in terms of the term?
70% say that they are familiar with the term. We have about a third of the population actively interested in buying it and being part of it. So it's much more widely known. And I think a lot of that is simply because of, honestly, Samsung gear, Samsung commercials, a lot of the media that's come out on that.
Does your research show that it's important for us to make that distinction? I get why it's important from a technology and from a content, et cetera, for mixed. But what if we just call it, you know, Xerox, it's Kleenex, it's VR? Is that important?
I don't think the consumer particularly cares. I mean, they do care about the IP. They will be all over Star Wars. They'll be all over The Walking Dead. They'll do those experiences. And I don't think we should underplay actually the near term of this. I mean, it's still cool to see something sitting on your table that's not real through your phone. That's still cool, right? So that gimmick will wear off over time, so everybody's got to keep working to get the headsets coming and on all those next phases. But as far as what we call it, I think until you have some sort of unified content access, that's probably whoever's going to win that game, is whoever can aggregate all these disparate platforms that are being created.
But just to reinforce a theme that Debbie and others have touched on, intellectual property and franchises like Star Wars and Pirates of the Caribbean, just to use two examples, have extraordinary power in virtual reality and augmented reality. And it's partly because the medium is so new, but it's also partly because both platforms are situational. You have to know who you are, and you want to know what you're going to do there, what is your goal, and how are you going to interact with people and things. And in the Star Wars world, well, you know that. You know who the bad guys are. You know what they want. You know what you stand for. You know on Pirates of the Caribbean what the goals are and what the characters do all the time. So, explaining is death in video games, and particularly in location-based, but really in any kind of entertainment, the more explaining you have to do, the less immersive it is. So these things do have to be intuitive, and well-known IP is the shortcut to get there. Other questions? Yes.
When designing your game, because you're releasing your game for a lot of different AR platforms, it sounds like, what basic functionalities can you rely on across those platforms, and is it more difficult to try and create something for all those platforms and to really hone in on the features of a specific one?
Can you repeat the question?
When you answer it, repeat the question.
Okay, I mean, what were the differences, I guess, between the platforms or the similarities as we did it? And the core gameplay was essentially the same, but how we interacted with it was different. For example, on HoloLens, you're still selecting the monsters and the tiles, but you're using gestures and air taps and things like that to select it. But honestly, it did evolve a lot. We had to take each platform kind of as its own animal a little bit. But there were, like, because we had done Tango, ARKit wasn't that big a leap for us, right? Because it's still markerless AR. So we had kind of the basics figured out. We hadn't scaled it up big or done anything like that yet. But we try to design things that don't run into those problems, I guess. That we you know, you don't know what every platform's going to be, but we know there'll be things like controllers. And because we also brought it to Oculus along the way, so I think we're the only AR, VR cross-platform title out there. And that enabled us to, like, sort of, it was similar to things I think like what Mira could be, or the Disney product, where, you know, you have a cursor and a controller and kind of experience it that way.
We have time for one last question, but I and the panelists will obviously be available to you and can answer whatever remaining questions. Yes, ma'am, you have your hand up there.
$199 at Best Buy.
Sir?
Yeah, curious what do you guys think AR is going to be sort of the workstation platform of the future, or can replace the laptop? And if so, who's best suited to kind of bring that?
Yes, Apple, Google.
Other questions? He's right. Yes.
I can just give a quick answer. I'd love to hear what these guys think. But our take on ARKit is, I mean, AR Core is we're kind of waiting and sitting back, because ARKit had reportedly up to 500 million devices available at launch. AR Core works on what? The Pixel 2 and Samsung 8. And
Google's
they're
trying to
supposedly shipping 100 million
Google
phones
bought
next year.
HTC's cellular business to address this issue. They need an end-to-end infrastructure to compete with Apple. So they are the invisible man, but that is the reason. Other questions? You can grab me after, and we'll talk more about that. Sorry, there's a guy back there who's had his hand up.
Yeah, just right there. Because I noticed with your kit that you're just about to come out, that there was a lot of, kind of like, it's just said, like marvelous AI, and I noticed a lot of that AI is there from hospital and stuff. Is yours running any part of marvelous?
In its first state, it's marker-based, 6DoF, with just built-in 3DoF, and then we currently have an early version of markerless that is available through our computer vision partner Wikitude. But ARKit and AR Core have set such a high standard for markerless moving forward that all other computer vision libraries kind of have a new pace to keep up with, and very quickly through software we'll be able to make the marker obsolete.
Thank you guys for coming and for listening to us. I want to thank the panelists. Michael Goslin from Disney, Mike Levine of Happy Giant, Ben Taft of Mira. I wish you guys luck with your products. I really admire what you're doing, and it's exciting to follow. And of course, Debbie Root from Magid. Thank